You probably get this a lot, Kim, because you're, a dissident, independent media person, but, being accused of being anti-American because you're
Oh yeah,
constantly
yeah.
criticizing U.S., especially on the foreign policy front. And I'm a firm believer that the U.S. and its allies, Britain and its European allies, can be a force for good in the world and a constructive force for prosperity. And
Yes.
my criticism is because I believe it's way off course, and it's actually detrimental to the long-term interests of the country itself and the people who live in the U.S. That's the source of my criticism, because I think America could do much better.
Yeah.
But a lot of people who don't like what you're saying are going to misconstrue that as being just based anti-American. And
It's like having a family and everybody in your family is now addicted to drugs and alcohol. And you're just trying to tell them like, look, this isn't healthy for you. This isn't good. I'm not okay with this. We've got to get you into rehab. We got to get you clean. We got to get you sober. We got to do better. Get a job, like go do these things. I mean, we're basically dealing with a country of drug addicts. It doesn't mean you don't love them. You still love your family. That's why you're sitting there telling them, get it together.
yeah,
That's why you're not stepping over them on the sidewalk. Instead, you're saying, get it together. We're better than this. We don't need to be the family of, we don't want to be the druggy family. And we are a drugged up country that is just high on greed
and credit
and
and credit.
right. And so, yeah, those of us who are speaking out about that, we're just telling our family to get off their ass, get a job and get clean and sober. That's what we're trying to say is that you guys are drunks.
Yeah, and also if you're robbing all your neighbors, eventually those neighbors might gang up and actually, attack you at some point.
Right.
And
Yeah.
nobody wants to see this happen, but the trajectory we're currently on, the U.S. led empire, as it were, it's heading in the wrong direction as far as that's concerned.
Very
And
much
the,
so,
the
yeah.
world is a lot more dangerous as a result. So all of this, we thought history ended at the end of the Cold War when the Soviet Union collapsed and Francis Fukuyama said it was the end of history. But instead of disbanding NATO and reorienting the U.S. and its allies with the world, they ramped up NATO
Yeah.
activity. They got more aggressive. They became more anti-Russian. As
It's
a result,
probably the greatest, I would say, failure, the greatest foreign policy failure, I think, in recent history was when the USSR collapsed, that the U.S. didn't, that the West didn't get together and say, okay, welcome to the fold now. Here we are. Like, let's band together and build up humanity and build up for a better future. I mean, that was probably the single greatest failure
no,
of all
instead
the failures.
they sent the economic jackals to Moscow to wax lyrical about the wonders of the free market, when in fact they were just trying to drain Russia of all its wealth and totally destabilize the country, and that's what they did in the 90s.
Yeah.
So that wasn't exactly altruism and goodwill, although that's how it was sold at the time. Kim, they're saying we're bringing them the wonders of the free market, and what it was predatory capitalism writ large. Everybody
Right.
knows there, but there's still people that are romanticizing about 90s Moscow, how great it was. We made so much money there.
And it isn't just that, oh, it was a failure that we could have been friends and we could have helped build the world, but it's a greater failure than that. We've ended up in all these proxy wars. People have died. I mean, there are just millions of deaths now because of our lack of ability to, well, because of the greed. Again, it's just always needing an enemy.
It's not just always need an enemy, but it's like trying to determine who's going to be prosperous and successful and who's not. Being able to pick winners and losers, and clearly the Western blob, the Atlanticist bloc, or whatever, does not want to see the Middle East become stable and prosperous, and they have every right to be stable and prosperous. But unfortunately, and this is just the way the world is, the borders that were drawn in the Sykes-Picot Agreement, which you're well aware of the history of the Middle East, within those contained just eternal problems in terms of
Right.
constantly being exacerbated and micromanaged from the outside. I'm talking about the Kurdish issue,
Yeah,
for
the Brits. I mean, the Brits, they just drew these arbitrary, stupid lines. I mean, look, and the USSR did the same thing. That's why they have issues that they have. There's a lot of these greater powers coming in, and
but yeah, Israel being the ultimate. Look
Yeah.
look the creation of Israel as a colonial settler state, a European colonial settler state in the Middle East.
Yeah.
There's a completely foreign element there, which is then becomes hyper militarized, given nuclear weapons, and is at war with all of its neighbors, and
Right.
decided that's not enough. We're going to genocide the native population within our administrative borders, what we claim are our borders. It's
Right.
been a disaster from the beginning. If you look at this historically, this is like the Fourth Crusades gone toxic, septic, in fact, for the region. But they're still talking about this like this is a fledgling democracy in the Middle East, and it's the Middle East's only democracy, and a people without a land without a people, clinging to all these old tropes.
Yeah.
But all it is a colonial settler project, a European colonial settler project. That's all it, at its base. That's what it is.
Right. Right. Yeah, I mean, and now I do think Israel is so large. There's no, I don't think that there's any ending Israel, but I do think there is a possibility that there's an end to the Jewish state, that it cannot retain its Jewish character as a Jewish nation, because it half the people living on that land are not Jewish.
As a
When you
pure
take in
religious, a pure ethno state, there
right,
really this shouldn't have any place in the 21st century, but this special exceptional status is granted to it for that reason. And you could argue, how is it a pure ethno state if there are majority of the people from Europe? That doesn't make sense. But then you get
right,
to the argument of what makes a Semitic people, and the Palestinians are Semites, the Syrians are Semites, the Lebanese are Semites, the Iraqis are Semites, but the people who migrated to Israel are not Semites. But if you
right.
criticize them, you're anti-Semitic. So it's a bit insane,
Oh,
actually.
it's the whole thing is really and it doesn't, you're right, it doesn't have any place in modern society, these kind of ethno-nationalist, ideas. It's amazing to me so many people can't see that. They say, "Well, then you're against Japan because Japan's filled with Japanese people," or, France, or whatever, and it's just it's one thing. I think that it's one thing to want to preserve your nation's character if you already have that character, and you make laws because you want to preserve that, like you want to limit immigration. I think that's, up to, as long as you're not harming other people, causing death and destruction in the process of doing that, then that is just your own country, managing your own country the way you want to manage your own country. And that's, I'm very hands off in that way. But it's when you start going around saying then, when they say, well, what about Japan? So then you're against Japan. And it's like, well, I was against Germany and the idea that they had of an Aryan nation. Are you against that as well? I mean, that's what,
Well, the
because that
Japanese
is
are indigenous to the island of
right.
Japan.
Right.
The
Exactly.
statute of limitations as well. You can't show up, 3,000 years later and say, because of this scripture in this book, that
Right.
I have title to the land, and literally turf out the natives at gunpoint. I mean, which is kind of what's been happening,
Right.
and subjugate them in an apartheid system. It's just totally bonkers. But because of the sort of emotive shadow of World War II and the Holocaust, this narrative was tolerated
Yeah.
to a degree, and I think there's enough distance in the rearview mirror now from the inception of this attempt at carving out an Israeli state in the Middle East in 1948, that a lot of people are reassessing the credentials of this whole
Yeah.
idea to begin with, and looking at it for what I personally see it as a Western Anglo-American colonial project that has grown kind of out of control
Yeah.
and now has its own sort of volition, and but it's served the West well in terms of dominating the region in the post-colonial era. But it's post-colonial, but not for Israel. Israel is still very much a colonial project, totally
Right.
subsidized by the United States and Western powers. So it has served them in terms of disrupting, destabilizing, and creating the polarity in the region where you have Gulf monarchs and then you have Arab nationalist states. Of course, the ones being attacked are the Arab nationalist states: Syria, Iraq, Yemen, Egypt to a degree, and Iran, for instance, not Arab, but indigenous Persian nationalist state. Turkey, to some degree as well, might fit the bill there. Lebanon, so but conveniently divided up into all little chunks and pieces, easy to set against each other, easy to control. And then the West can back Kurdish separatist movements that straddle 5 different states, which is
Right.
very convenient as well for weakening what would
Yeah.
normally be strong countries that could stand on their own 2 feet, but unfortunately not at the moment.
What a mess. When you were in Russia, what was the sentiment about Israel there?
Was very interesting. While I was there, they invited the Palestinian resistance factions for a dialogue in Moscow. Now, this is very
Mm.
significant. So, you have Hamas, you have the PIJ, you have all these different Palestinian factions, plus the PA, and I guess some people, Fatah people as well, were there. So, Why was this significant? It means that Russia is basically hosting a dialogue. So now major things in the Middle East are running through Moscow. This is not the first time. The whole Syrian thing was resolved, not resolved, but somewhat stabilized because of Russia's intervention in October of 2015. But not just that. What was significant about Russia and Syria, which looms large today, was
Mhm.
they basically were the force behind the Astana peace process, which took place in Kazakhstan, not in Switzerland, not hosted
Mhm.
by John Kerry and Hillary Clinton. So you
Mhm.
can see the center of gravity geopolitically shifting towards
Yeah.
Eurasia, and so that's what I would take away from this host this dialogue, which was hosted by Russia. And I'm sure Israel is not happy about this because this is
Yeah.
also going to transform the relationship that Russia, the country of Russia, has with the state of Israel. And also, you look at Russia militarily; they're moving military assets into the Golan Heights right now in the last couple of weeks. This is
Hmm.
not insignificant. So you're seeing a major change here. So Russia, this a terrorist attack that you brought up, Kim, is part of the story. Russia regards this now as a potentially a Western conceived plot
Yeah.
to destabilize their country and using actors that are active in the theater in Syria, for instance. So this extends the security concern much wider, and that includes Israel now. You see, so
Mhm.
this is a different. We're seeing the borders, the rules of the game, the grand chessboard. Zbigniew Brzezinski's grand chessboard is now shifting.
Interesting.
It's changing. It's changing,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
we're seeing this. You deal with this on a daily basis, as do I. But
Yeah.
I've just got back from Washington. They have no idea. I talk to foreign policy people. They don't even know what the axis of resistance is. I mean, seriously. So we're dealing with people in charge that are very gung ho, very pro war, want to show U.S. power, but they don't actually understand what's going on the ground in
Right.
any of these regions. Forget about China, just Middle East, Russia, Ukraine. They're getting all their information from the Washington Post, from CNN, from the New York Times, and the
Right.
Atlantic. Yeah,
AKA CIA. That's where they're getting their information. I
yeah.
mean,
So these are people forming policy and deciding where to deploy U.S. resources and assets, and they don't know any more than the average university student, as far as I'm concerned. So
yeah,
it
how
is.
about deploy those resources at home and build our own country and stop focusing on all these other countries and let them be them and we be us and we build ourselves up and go back into being a nation that, if we build ourselves up well, other nations will want to be like us. We'll have that
No
rather
trade.
than bullying them.
You can trade with other nations. You can do things together. This is the Ron Paul's kind of, which I love Ron Paul's attitude, which is that we can trade and be prosperous together. We
Yeah.
don't need, we don't need to fight and kill each other. So I mean, this
No.
is kind of a no brainer, but for some people, this is a big challenge to sort of conceptualize that
I
reality.
just think, kind of like in the far, far future when there's aliens and there's other worlds and we, we finally know that there's other worlds out there. We will have to band together at that point as one, just like we've had to as states. States have, I go back to like ancient medieval times, right? When you look at like Italy and how Italy was a bunch of different little, you had like those that lived in Venice and those in Florence and they warred with one another. And now
City.
it's one nation. Yeah, they had all those city states and now they're one nation and they're one nation. They're no longer at war with one another. And now the United States, you could have done that with states, like each individual state. Well, we did it. We had a civil war. There's wars with one another, and then at some point you say, no, we are all, when we're all prosperous together, the whole country rises when we're together and we're all prosperous. That can happen even on a global level. It does, and that is, and I don't want anybody to get confused thinking that's like globalist agenda of like elites running everything. It's not like that. It's just we can each govern ourselves just like the states do, but we can have prosperity. We would see and we would understand that the weakest link, that we are only as strong as our weakest link. And that's globally. If we could get everybody to a point of prosperity, then we as a nation, we as a globe thrive.
Mm.
And then if you think about it in the far future, million years from now, when there's all these alien other nations that we're zooming around to or something, I think about that. I'm like, oh man, they're going to look back at this history and they're going to be like, look at those barbarians fighting with each other all the time.
Well, that's what they said during COVID, Kim. They said, "Oh, the world could come together to fight this alien microscopic particle
Well, not
virus."
like that. I'm saying not like that.
Instead, they shut down the economy and put everything in a tailspin. No, but you're right, Kim. There's no borders from space. If
Right.
you
Well,
go into orbit, you look down. If you fly across the world internationally and you look down, there's no borders there.
there are no borders. Those are artificial. They're created.
You see people. So, but when you get down to the ground, human nature is such that the number one organizing principle in the world right now is the sort of post-Westphalian nation state. So that's
Yeah.
still the dominant system. So we have to work within this system to optimize it, or to transition regionally, or maybe one day globally into another system. But it's yeah, we're a complicated species of.
Well, we don't have to be, and I really don't think we are. I mean, I think it boils down to what you've said over and over during this interview, which is, people care about, they just want to be able to have paved roads and a job and food on the on the shelves, and that is what people want. That's what all people want all around the whole world. And if we could just put the knives down and just say, look, you govern your. It's just like we do with families. We say, okay, you govern your family the way you want, and I'll govern my family the way I want, but we still have to work together and live in a community. And that is, we could kind of view the world that way, but we just don't. We're just not there yet. I don't know if we will be in our lifetimes,
Throughout
unfortunately.
human history, peace, and modern history anyway, peace has been the exception and not the rule. A lot of times countries have been at war,
Yeah.
but with progress, with technology, with raise in living standards, there is a chance that things can be more stable and more peaceful over
Yeah.
a longer term. But there's people fighting against that they don't want that to happen, unfortunately, or they don't mind. They want to keep their area stable, but then they'll wreck
Yeah.
another area in order to gain control over it, or teach somebody a lesson, which is what we're seeing right now in certain parts of the world. So, but
Terrible.
these
Patrick,
are
this has been such a great conversation with you. You are so knowledgeable, traveling around. You're normally in Europe, right? Or in do the Brits, do they think that they're in Europe? Do they say they're in Europe, or they're like, no, we're in the
not now,
UK?
not now
They
after
don't. They
Brexit.
don't.
Definitely
Okay.
not. But it is ostensibly Europe.
Right.
There's still a lot of people that are pro Europe in Britain, but generally it's no longer part of like Europe. It's now the UK and Europe.
Oh, I see.
But
Okay.
it
Okay.
could change. They could easily migrate back into the EU under different terms. A lot of people think that's actually going to happen
Maybe.
in the next couple of years. So we'll see. We'll see.
Interesting. Well, it's so great to connect with you. And tell us about when you have a show. Tell us about your show and where people can watch it and how often.
I've got two shows. One is the Sunday Wire, which has been going since 2013. That is on every Sunday, most Sundays, and it's sometimes video, but always audio. And that's a long running podcast, live radio stream going to podcast on Sundays at 21stcenturywire.com. You can always catch it there. It's on all the audio streams and stuff. But then I do a show for TNT radio Monday to Friday, which is, I think, now 4 p.m. till 6 p.m. East Standard Time, and then UK 9 till 11 p.m. So it's later time slot there, and that's Monday to Friday. That's hard politics, news analysis. So I do 7 live shows a week, I think,
I
in
can't
total.
believe that. That's
Yeah.
insane.
So I
That's
gotta scale
insane.
back at some point, Kim. You maybe give me
Yeah.
some advice on how I could do it easier.
Yeah, right, you gotta have some balance, a little bit of balance in your li take the weekends off, but I
Mm,
guess if you've been doing that podcast for so long, it's hard to do.
we might have to change that. So, we'll work on it.
Yeah.
We'll work on it.
Wow. I maybe it wouldn't be so bad if it were just audio. For me, like, the camera ready and having to be someplace and in front of a camera, I think is a lot harder than, like, doing so maybe that would be
Yeah.
something to consider.
It's
Interesting.
it's a lot of work, but, we have a long-term loyal, listener and
Yeah.
follower base, and it means a lot to them. So when we're not there, we're not on the stream, people are missing that part of their life, that part of their routine.
Yeah.
Set it up for coffee or tea or dinner or whatever, and they just
And
listen.
how long is that podcast?
2
Like
to
an
3 hours, 2 to 3
2 to
hours.
3 hours, and then you have your daily show, which is also 2 hours?
2 hours, yeah, yeah.
Oh my gosh, I don't even know how you do that.
Yeah. I was doing Twitter Spaces for a while, which is a
Oh my
great
gosh,
great
don't even.
platform, but that's such a
I'm
great
clearly so lazy
it's
compared
a
to
great
you.
interactive platform, so, but I stopped doing the Spaces, just because it was hard to do it regularly. It's very erratic,
Yeah.
having to write articles or cover a story or whatever.
I think they're still trying to figure that Twitter thing out. I think it's still kind of in development, and the numbers are completely inflated over there. They're like, "Oh, look at all these people," but it's not really. It's I
It's
don't think they've figured it out yet.
It's a great platform and is for all of its faults, and there are many, by the way. And Elon Musk hasn't always delivered what he promised in terms of pure
Yeah.
free speech, but overall, it's allowed dissenting voices, especially pro-Palestinian voices, which has been so invaluable in the last 6 months. The things that we've been able to see and witness that we
Yeah,
would
for
not
sure.
have been able to see under the previous regime, I can tell you, the stuff that they're striking off YouTube is unbelievable. The amount of
Yeah.
censorship on Facebook. So if at least there's that platform there, Rumble as well has been very good, but
Yeah, of course.
especially X, Twitter, it's allowed people to see with their own eyes what's really going on in the world and allowed them to organize and share ideas and to activate. So.
Yeah,
And I think that's a force for good in the world on balance.
I
So
agree.
let's hope it stays that way.
I hope it does. I really hope it does. But after Elon's pilgrimage to Israel, things shifted a little bit, and I'm just hoping it doesn't. I hope that there is still a lot of free thought and free information, the ability to get all that information. Well, Patrick, we do have the links down below for people to check out your daily show. You're so knowledgeable. And daily, I mean daily, every day except Saturday. So, thank you again for being here. Really appreciate your time.
Thank you, Kim. Oh, anytime, anytime.